The U.S. has been testing its missiles. Canada is now testing the waters. After years of opposition to Washington's plans for a new North American missile defense system, today Ottawa said it may be ready to come on board.
The government has decided to enter into discussions with the United States on Canada's participation in ballistic missile defense.
And if somebody is going to be sending over missiles over Canadian airspace, we want to be at the table. But Canada's position is very much against the weaponization of outer space.
The reality is that once you're in those discussions, it's very hard to get out.
Canada's been talking to the U.S. since last May about joining its missile defense plan, but the new Martin government is now ready to ratchet up the discussions by signing a deal to get more secret information. Pratt insists a decision on whether to actually take part in missile defense is still months away. Still, it is sending a signal to Washington, just days before Martin's first meeting with George Bush, that Canada's new government may be more willing than the old one to cooperate with the Americans.
The government flatly denies a report that Ottawa has decided to join the U.S.-led missile defense field. The Globe and Mail says the Liberals hope to keep the issue under wraps until after an election.
The fact that the elections is happening now really is an opportunity to focus our discussion about missile defense and a chance for Canadians to send a clear message to candidates and to the government that missile defense is something that we do not want and that it's a bad idea and Canada should not participate.
Similar rallies were held across the country, including in Halifax, Toronto, Edmonton, and Victoria.
And I'm asking you to hold yourself to account. What is the difference between your Star Wars, your missile defense, and Stephen Harper's? At least he comes out and says we should do it.
I've said, and I've said to George Bush, and I say to the Canadian people, we will never engage in weaponization of space.
It was virtually a non-issue for Paul Martin in the election campaign. But just days after the election, Martin did take up missile defense in his first post-election phone call with U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Paul Cellucci.
Well, when I talked to the Prime Minister last week, he did say this was an issue that the government would address.
Cellucci is well aware there's now a minority government here, but doesn't expect that to impede Ottawa's decision.
Well, governments have to make decisions. We expect that this government will make a decision in a timely manner.
Ottawa says the decision is all about saving NORAD. NORAD will now be allowed to pass on information about any hostile missiles to the U.S. commanders who operate the country's new defense shield. Without that agreement, Ottawa says NORAD could have become irrelevant. Graham stressed that Canada is not signing on to the U.S. missile defense project, an option he says will be decided later. As for the Conservatives who have supported missile defense, they want more information about the government decision.
You don't sign a contract for a car or a house without reading the agreement.
What's on Liberal minds? Canada's potential involvement in the U.S. Missile Defense Program.
My concern is that it increases proliferation of arms instead of preventing it.
I don't want Canadians and the Canadian government to be part of something that, in my view, even American generals think is not going to work.
Then there's Ontario MP Carolyn Parrish, another Liberal opponent of the U.S. plan, today joining a protest against it.
We are not joining the coalition of the idiots. We are joining the coalition of the lies.
It's a system the United States wants Canada to sign on to. But the technology is unreliable, leading some scientists to declare it a dud.
This system, as it's currently configured, and in terms of all the plans that they have for indefinite modernization, has no chance of working.
Politics is where it gets really messy. Paul Martin has said it's better to be involved than shut out.
We have to be at the table.
Opposition parties are demanding a vote on the issue. And Martin's own caucus isn't entirely united. At protests across the country, a warning. Missile defense today, weaponization of space tomorrow, they say. Others are worried about Canada's share of a program that could cost up to $60 billion US.
It seems to be inappropriate and even obscene to spend that kind of money on a missile defense program.
It's an issue that has barely sparked interest in the U.S. presidential election race, but stands to become a very hot topic in Canada when Parliament resumes next week.
The United States has asked Canada to be a part of its ballistic missile shield, suggesting if Canada were to put forward money, military personnel, or even territory to base more missiles on, it would be invited to join. But many Canadians believe the price of membership is simply too high.
The worst fear of all,
that cost, argues Mel Hurtig, is dangerous, saber-rattling.
What we're looking at right now is a renewed arms race.
More trouble for Paul Martin on the issue of missile defense.
The Quebec wing of the federal Liberal Party passed a resolution this weekend demanding the government say no to the controversial Bush scheme.
Ears perked up when George Bush brought up the topic of missile defense at the meeting with the Prime Minister, and then publicly more than once.
And safeguard our continent against attack from ballistic missiles.
The NDP's foreign affairs critic says Paul Martin is trying to downplay the dangers of missile defense to please the Americans.
Martin really basically tried to hide in weeds on this issue and let it slide through.
The Prime Minister may not be able to delay a decision on missile defense much longer, an issue that's fast becoming a political time bomb.
Before deciding to join the U.S. Missile Defense Plan, Martin wants to know about any price tag and what influence Canada will have when it comes to pulling the trigger.
Are we going to participate? It really depends on the nature of the voice that we have in it. But I am going to protect our airspace. I'm going to protect our sovereignty. But I'm not going to be engaged in something where, in fact, we are simply an innocent bystander.
And then there's this commonly heard complaint about the Prime Minister.
A guy who can't make up his mind. Are you a ditterer?
No, I don't think so.
A brainstorming session on Canada-U.S. relations has recommended that Ottawa join the U.S. Missile Defense Plan. The group, made up of Canadians and Americans, claims the missile project has been wrongly linked to the weaponization of space. Still, a handful of Canadians at the summit expressed reservations about joining the program.
Polls show a majority of Canadians oppose Canada's participation in missile defense, and so far neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives have come down firmly either for or against the plan.
We are. That's right. We're part of it now, and the question is what more we need.
Mr. Speaker, let me assure the honourable member and other honourable members of the House, Canada's position is not a done deal. We will...
Are we or are we not for missile defense? Soon-to-be Canadian ambassador to the U.S., Frank McKenna, says we are, while Defense Minister Bill Graham says not yet. And today, we see reports that Prime Minister Martin says that we aren't, and he's expected to announce that officially tomorrow.
Most importantly, public opinion has just been growing in opposition to this, and the government has to respond to that. He can't just go with what George Bush wants, because we do still live in a democracy.
Okay.
The special podium hinted at big news to come. After months of what critics call dithering, he finally made it official.
That we are announcing today that Canada will not take part in the proposed ballistic missile system.
Paul Martin insisted missile defense just isn't a Canadian priority like it is for the Americans.
We really don't get it. We're kind of perplexed by the decision.
Liftoff is confirmed. I hope we'll also move forward on ballistic missile defense cooperation.
But despite arm twisting by George Bush, Martin did an about-face, giving into public and political pressure that threatened his minority government.
I have no doubt that if we had a majority Liberal government, we would already be in missile defense and saying so.
As opponents celebrated, the decision also played well in the street.
I think it's a very good move on our government's part.
I think that's great that they're standing up for their own, they're not just going along with what the American government wants them to go along with.
And after saying no to Iraq, now missile defense, Martin offered other help to the U.S.
The substantial increases made yesterday to our defense budget are a tangible indication that Canada intends to carry its full share.
His decision timed to avoid an expected showdown over missile defense at the big Liberal convention next week. As for U.S. fence mending, Prime Minister plans to call the President in the next few days. Roger Smith, CTV News, Ottawa.